The movie opens up with a pregnant young lady named Belinda checking out herself in a mirror. Few moments after this, the young lady began to lecture her student in what seems to be an anthropology class. However, after the class, she drove over to go pick her husband, and they both had a brief discussion about their little unborn child. She and her husband, Norman, both went for antenatal. The baby seems good. Although it seems like a high-risk pregnancy, the lady seems perturbed by something. After their checkup, the two went back home, still anxious about her baby, and also worried about losing her job, all because she is carrying a child and can't seems to work more efficiently as when she wasn't pregnant and feels everything is a mess. During all this, a call came in. A woman speaks at the other end. She was asked who she was, and her reply was, "I am his mother." It was Solange, Norman's stepmom. Something is up. Norman seems to have gone through a lot in the hands of Solange, and now she wants him to come home to see his father because he is dying of cancer. Belinda tried to convince him to go see his dad, but this made Norman very furious. He went on further to explain to Belinda, saying that his stepmother believed that the Holy Spirit possesses her and gives her powers, as she called it, her sign and wonder. Norman also believed that she might not even approve of their relationship, so he does not want anything to do with them. The night falls. We hear a baby's voice, and Belinda walks into the room where the voice is coming from. Norman calls out to her, and she regains herself. She admitted to Norman that she was sleepwalking. The next day, Belinda gets frustrated and quits her job after waiting for her boss outside his office. After she did so, she went straight back home and called Norman, who was drinking away his sorrows as he just received a call that his dad has passed away. Few days had now passed, so Norman and Belinda went for the funeral. They all gathered to pay their last respect. As Norman tries to leave, Pastor Lewis asked that Norman goes to seize his stepmother, Solange, and he obliged after much hesitation. He and Belinda walks towards where she was, looking weird with veil on her head. She asked that Belinda helps her remove her veils so she can have a better view of them. They exchanged pleasantries, while Norman was still quiet. Solange is surprised at the sight of Belinda's pregnancy. She told Belinda and said it's a girl. Belinda was shocked at such revelation and curious at the same time about her findings. They chatted a little while going through the will. Solange is giving everything she owns to Norman, but in returns, she wants him to take her home with him, as per that what Norman's father had wanted, and for her to leave her final days with him. Norman is not having it, due his childhood experiences with her, as his stepmother isn't convinced that she has changed. Belinda was able to convince him to let her stay with them. Plus, they could use the money she is offering since they are quite penniless. Barely a minute in their home, and Solange has found fault in where they set the baby's nursery, which was in the front room downstairs. This made Belinda to change her mind to change the location where the baby nursery would be. Belinda and Solange then tried to know each other as they talked about a picture of when Solange was young. Norman and Belinda then took Solange to her bedroom. At dinner, Solange urged them to say a prayer before meal. As they ate and discussed, Solange asked for the name she plans on calling the baby in her womb, and of course, she found problem with the name Belinda chose. After what sounded like an incantation, she, Solange, settled for Lawrence, but since it's supposedly a girl, she chose Lori. At night, Belinda had a really bad dream which woke her up in fear. The next day, Belinda knocks at Solange's room, but no response, so she opened up and found her on the floor. She called out to her with fear in mind that she was dead, but creepy Solange woke up and asked her to help her to her feet. Looks like Solange is afraid of getting old. At dinner, they made small talks as Solange discussed with Norman on how she and Belinda are now becoming more like a friend. But just then, Norman perceived something he described as musty. Apparently, Belinda and Solange has something to tell him, but Solange doesn't want that. Belinda still went ahead to tell Norman. Solange is getting old and now she is incontinent. She bedwets. This really made Solange very upset, as she threw her cutleries and walked away. Things only got worse as she made a mess of herself and was clearly incontinent to Norman, who carried her to have her cleaned up. Belinda noticed a weird smile from Solange as Norman carries her away, very creepy. Afterwards, Norman hurriedly left for work, while Belinda finished the job Norman was supposed to do, since he hurriedly left for work without completely bathing her. After that, Belinda felt a sharp pain, as she is now in labor and Solange is beginning to get into her head. Now back home with her new baby, she walks to the house to a totally different home from what she knew, with some weird-looking guests. Solange took the baby from weak Belinda, and they all went ahead to speak in tongues over her and the baby while placing their hands on her belly. Belinda now looked more confused than ever, was eventually able to get herself back and shouted at them to stop. She took back her baby and asked all of them to leave. Just then Norman arrived and Belinda told her about what they had done to her, but just then, Belinda was informed that it was her husband who invited them to come over. During their meal, Belinda and Solange argued over Christianity, racism, and whatnot. Belinda seems not to be having any of Solange's tantrums, as what was meant to be a dinner turns chaos. Meanwhile, the baby kept crying and Belinda noticed that baby Lori stops crying as soon as she sees the cross. This made Belinda very shocked that she had to call Norman to confirm it too. Belinda is worried. Solange is taking over everything, as she is trying to replace her. Belinda is coming to the realization of what Solange is doing. That very morning, Solange woke up and began to scream for help, and obviously, Solange had made a mess of herself and the whole apartment is stained with her shit. Belinda isn't having this anymore and immediately went on call to speak to Norman to head back home as she herself is already fed up. After Solange tried to baptize baby Lori without her consent and Belinda objected and stopped her from continuing, Solange fell down herself and got injured just at the point Norman returns home to see Solange bleeding. Surprised by this, so he rushed her to the hospital, got her treated. That same evening, Norman arrived at home and began to yell at Belinda for not taking care of her baby, but Belinda furiously told Norman that her baby does not want to get attached to her. Norman also told Belinda what Solange told all the nurses at the hospital, saying Belinda tried to eliminate her. After hearing all of this, Belinda then told Norman that they need to employ a nurse to take care of her, but Norman isn't financially ready for this yet. Belinda played nurse to Solange and also nursed her baby while Norman was out with clients. And oh, Solange never made it any easier. It was complete torture and Norman was barely home. Belinda told Pastor Lewis what she, Solange, is doing to her and her family, but Pastor Lewis told Belinda about the miracle she did for him when he was an addict, but this only made Belinda to ask him out of her house. At night, we hear loud songs playing as Belinda walks out. She opens the door and saw Norman in a situation. She ran out to puke. Norman calls out to her with his baby in his arms. Baby Lori had marks of bites on her hand, and Norman thought it was Belinda after what she supposedly did to Solange. She asked him to look closely at the bite, which was missing a tooth like Solange. Norman went up to Solange's room to confront her. She spat on him. They left. The next morning, Belinda woke up to Lori feeding on her directly for the first time. They were very happy. Afterward, she walked down to Solange's room and met her dead. After the funeral, Belinda took out Solange's traditional chair and portraits and wanted to run it over with her car, probably to completely get rid of Solange. It's a bright morning. Belinda is heavily pregnant with twins. They looked so happy. Belinda sings happily as she drives to the school where she teaches. While talking with a woman, she recalls what happened the night before Solange died. They were asleep and suddenly she hears Solange saying, "Why can't I die?" repeatedly. Belinda went to her room and used her pillow to suffocate her till she died. Belinda, after this realization, then made a huge smile of fulfillment in her heart. The movie Front Room then came to an end. Kindly subscribe if you enjoy recap like this. Thanks for watching and goodbye.